Well, we're back with Kerry Cordero, Shan Wu, and John Avlon. What does that mean, Shan? Never took control of the Justice Department.
It's really amazing hearing him say that. I think he means that Sessions has done things that he doesn't like, most notably recusing himself from the Russian investigation. And frankly, when you hear him talk like that, one is surprised that he hasn't already fired Sessions. I mean, there's some sort of countervailing measure going on where he's not doing that, but it's really stunning to hear a president say that about his attorney general without firing him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, clearly it's in reference also to what had just happened in here in New York with Michael Cohen, and the president actually tweeted about this and mentioned this. You know, he had a different attorney general. Obama had a different attorney general, so campaign finance laws were handled differently. This is the Justice Department, the Southern District, that has brought these charges against Michael Cohen, Kerry, which is a remarkable thing. It is a remarkable thing to see the system at work here.
Sure. Well, the president has always had a distorted view of the way that the Justice Department is supposed to work. In his view, I think he came into office thinking that the Justice Department was going to be his own arm of enforcement and an agency that would be able to carry out political retribution. That's the type of language that he used along the campaign, where he wanted to say people will be prosecuted, someone will be locked up. This is the vision that he has, and unfortunately he hasn't amended or updated or learned or gained more respect for how independent justice system is supposed to work since he's been in office.
John, Shan just said it's amazing that the president hasn't fired Jeff Sessions when he continually publicly denigrates him. Well, the president just commented on that.
Oh.
Here's this moment.
Jeff Sessions recused himself, which he shouldn't have done, or he should have told me. Even my enemies say that Jeff Sessions should have told you that he was going to recuse himself, and then you wouldn't have put him in. He took the job, and then he said, I'm going to recuse myself. I said, what kind of a man is this? And by the way, he was on the campaign. You know, the only reason I gave him the job, because I felt loyalty. He was an original supporter. He was on the campaign. He knows there was no collusion.
Not qualifications. The only reason I gave him the job was loyalty. That's what jumped out at me. What jumps out at you?
A lot of things. I mean, first of all, Jeff Sessions has a hostile work environment. I mean, the president hates his attorney general. He has denigrated him, called him weak, MIA. This is doubling down on that language. He feels constrained from firing him because senators have said, look, we're going to have to confirm his replacement, and you know that's not going to be an easy process for you. The other thing, that by calling out the loyalty, he's highlighting another problem. Which is the problem is for Jeff Sessions is that he was on the campaign. And when he got pressed for not disclosing meetings with Russians, that's when he had to recuse himself because that's the process.
The president omits that in the chronology. He always forgets that part. He acts as though this was always sort of a predestined idea of Jeff Sessions that he was going to recuse himself.
Yeah.
There was a chronology where steps happened where he realized he couldn't stay overseeing the Russia.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this deep state plot to have, you know, Jeff Sessions embedded with the campaign and Paul Manafort. I mean, this is a really long game they've been playing here, people. But it's absolutely ludicrous. He also has this idea that Eric Holder, as Attorney General to Barack Obama, was his personal enforcer. Yeah. Not understanding, for example, how the FEC works and other things.
To this point,
germane to
I have not heard the President of the United States express any concern that Paul Manafort broke the law, which he was convicted of, that Michael Cohen broke the law, which he pleaded guilty to.
No, what the president says is, so do a lot of other campaigns.
But zero concern. His concern is that his Attorney General of the United States did not keep them from being prosecuted for breaking the law. That's astounding. And that gets to the next point here. Let's talk about this issue of the pardon, Shan, for a moment. The President of the United States, Josh Gerstein, who writes for Politico, one of my reportorial mentors, if you will, says it's not a matter of if the president's going to pardon Paul Manafort. It's an issue of when. Do you feel like that's the signal being sent by the president?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. I think it could happen at any moment. The president has shown he does not need any paper. He does not need any decision-making process for it. It could happen at 1 a.m. in the morning with a tweet. So I think that's very likely to happen. And, you know, something that Kerry said about his not understanding the system, I was thinking about this yesterday. You know, there's so many comparisons to President Nixon, and the one thing is Nixon was a lawyer, a pretty sharp lawyer, and understood the justice system and had a certain reverence for it, and that's probably why he stepped down. The president really, at times, just does not seem to get it at all.
Kerry, if the president pardons Paul Manafort, does that then shut down the second phase of this, the next trial that is to come?
Yeah, well, it depends on the timing. So he could pardon him today. And then, then that would be it. Then he would not have to go through that if the president pardoned him for past and anything else that he might be involved with. Or he could wait to see if the D.C. trial goes through. But I have to say, anyone who's skeptical about whether or not a pardon is seriously on the table, I would just say that when I look back at the president's actions, I tend to take him at his word. When Donald Trump says that he's going to institute a Muslim ban, I believed him. When he said that he's going to revoke the security clearances of John Brennan and other former national security officials, I believe him. And so when he says language like Paul Manafort is a good man and what's happened is really sad, and that type of language that he's used for other people who he has actually previously used his pardon authority for, I think people should be taking it very seriously. And so the question is, would he do it before the D.C. trial, or will he wait until some later time? It could be after the trial. It could even be much later down the road. But the things that he's saying publicly should be taken seriously. And one other point on Jeff Sessions, just very briefly. Jeff Sessions followed the ethics rules of the Justice Department. And so there's lots of things, whether or not people like Jeff Sessions or they disagree with many of the policies that he's implemented at the Justice Department, I would argue that the most important decision that he made as Attorney General was to follow the ethics advice of the Justice Department lawyers and recuse himself for that investigation. And every single time that the president talks about his recusal publicly is another peg in the step of going towards an obstruction investigation. And if we know that the Mueller investigation is looking at obstruction, every time the president publicly chastises the Attorney General and places pressure on him, whether it's privately or publicly, it's another step in that obstruction case.
Really quickly, last night we did hear from one of the jurors on the Paul Manafort case. Let's listen very quickly.
We all tried to convince her to look at the paper trail. We laid it out in front of her again and again, and she still said that she had a reasonable doubt. And that's the way the jury worked. We didn't want it to be hung, so we tried for an extended period of time to convince her, but in the end, she held out, and that's why we have 10 counts that did not get a verdict.
This is one juror, Shan, saying that there was one holdout on the 10 counts that were hung there. But we also learned some other fascinating things from this juror. What did you take from her comments?
That makes a lot of sense. And when we saw that first note, that's what many of us thought was going on, was they needed a re-instruction on reasonable doubt to convince somebody. And it really shows the jury tried very hard to work, because they didn't keep sending notes out saying we just can't get along. They really tried to work it through. And some of those other comments about the credibility of Gates, I thought, were very eye-opening as well.
Yeah, and stunning, too, that woman said she's a Trump supporter. She said she didn't want Manafort to be guilty, but the preponderance of evidence forced it.
That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it's supposed to work.
Well,
I wonder if during these hardened times when people are in their corners, if it's getting harder to find consensus on a jury. But we have more new developments. So the president has just spoken about Michael Cohen and what the president thinks should be the illegal part of all of this.
It's called flipping, and it almost ought to be illegal. You get 10 years in jail, but if you say bad things about somebody, in other words, make up stories, if you don't know, make up stories, they just make up lies. Alan Dershowitz said, compose, right? They make up lies. I've seen it many times. They make up things, and now they go from 10 years to they're a national hero. They have a statue erected in their honor. It's not a fair thing, but that's why he did it. He made a very good deal.
John, you let out an audible guffaw. Why?
Wow. The President of the United States just freelancing on what his code of law would be in the United States, where flipping or ratting out, as mobsters might say, somebody, that would be the real crime, not actually telling the truth after stonewalling after months. That is stunning. And he's really just freelancing his own vision of what the law would be. And it's you know, stoolie pigeons. You know, they really get the shiv, not people telling the truth under duress.
He says flipping should be a crime.
Yes,
the President of the United States
just said that just happened.
Flipping should be a crime, not directing one of your lawyers to spend money to help you win an election, not bank fraud, not tax evasion, not money laundering.
Not trying to
Shan,
influence an election.
Shan, your thoughts?
That's not likely to be a new addition in the criminal code. That's my thought.
You speak with great understatement, but that is absurd and unprecedented to have the President of the United States say something like that.
Yeah, it is quite outrageous. And again, I think it reflects his complete lack of understanding of the criminal justice system and his lack of interest in understanding it as well.
Or his disdain. Or his disdain for the criminal justice system and his disdain for justice, which he often refers to with quotation marks when he tweets about it.
All right.
Leave that there.
Panel, thank you very much for all of your expertise.